right. Hello there, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. Before we get started today, just want to go through a couple of housekeeping items for everyone on today's webinar. First and foremost, this webinar will be recorded, so if you happen to miss any piece of this, don't worry, we'll get the recording out to you via email, as well as the slide deck, so you have all of the information that's included. If you have any questions relating to the functionality of the webinar, say that you can't hear us, you're having trouble seeing, please feel free to use the chat functionality and we'll work to respond to those questions as quickly as we can. If you have any questions for the participants on the webinar today, please feel free to use the Q&A functionality that's on the bottom of your screen. If you hover at the bottom of the screen, you should be able to click that, ask a question, and we'll answer those both via text and live at the end of the webinar for our Q&A session. With that, we'll go ahead and get things started. Today's webinar is on driving transfer enrollment with emergency aid support. Looking at our agenda today, we'll do a brief introduction to all of the speakers on the call. I promise you don't have to listen to me ramble on the entire time. We have some great guests joining us today. We'll talk a little bit about emergency aid and how we're defining that in the context of the case study that we're working on in the presentation today. An introduction to Edquity and our partnership with California State University Dominguez Hills. Then we'll go through the results of that case study and make sure that we have plenty of time to answer any questions that you might have at the end of the webinar today. So my name is Larry Hogan. I'm the Vice President of Partnerships here at Edquity. I'm the least important person on this call, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Maria to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Good to be with you. My name is Maria Grandone. I'm the Director of the University Advisement Center at the California State University Dominguez Hills.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Cesar Jimenez. I'm the Dean of Counseling and Guided Pathways at Compton College. And looking at my profile picture, I have to update it now that I have a beard.
Well, Cesar and Maria, thank you both so much for joining us today. Excited to hear from the two of you a little later on in the presentation. So as I mentioned, everyone, we're going to start by framing a little bit about emergency aid and how we think about emergency aid here. One of the key statistics that we often cite is that each year 3 million students drop out of college because of a financial emergency of $500 or less. A lot of times we think that it requires $2,500 to $7,500 to save a student, right? If they can't clear a tuition bill, if they can't afford books, that it costs that amount of money. But what we actually know is that if we look beyond tuition to some of those more basic needs, food, housing, transportation, that you can actually save your students by eliminating some of the financial emergencies that they might have that cost $500 or less. And what we know is that 25% of students in the last year reported that they ran out of money 5 or more times, right? This is a persistent problem that we see across a student base. We know that 51% of college students experience some type of food insecurity, whether that's not being able to afford healthy meals or they're rationing meals. 9% of college students were homeless or at risk of becoming homeless in the last year. And we know that 45% of college students experience some type of housing insecurity. And what we've seen is that these problems continue to be exacerbated in a post-pandemic environment and being impacted by inflationary pressures that we're seeing across the economy today. And so what does this mean for our institutions? Collectively, it results in a $22 to $32 billion revenue loss each year, which means as we look at creating more scholarship programs or success programs or partnerships on campus, it becomes more difficult to afford those and the staff that it takes to support those initiatives that you want to manage on campus. And so we often talk about it, in an easy formula. If you think about the number of students you lose as a result of that financial emergency, the net tuition revenue that they bring into the university, you can see that that starts to add up on an individual university by university basis. And so let's talk a little bit about the landscape of emergency aid quickly. There are a number of institutions that implement emergency aid in different types of ways. Could be campus vouchers, completion scholarships, restricted grants, unrestricted grants, emergency loans, and food pantries. Today, largely what we're going to focus on is unrestricted grants. And the rationale for that is when a student is experiencing a financial hardship, there are a bunch of compounding factors that could impact their ability to succeed at college. If we start using things like restricted grants that can often come with a GPA requirement or a credit enrollment requirement, students who are facing financial hardship are often the most likely to have a lower GPA because they're struggling with finances. They also struggle with academics. They also might struggle to overcome any other hurdles that are in their way to completing their degree. With unrestricted grants, your institution is saying, we're here to support you. There are no restrictions on this fund. We just want to give you the resources you need to help succeed here at the university. And so a survey that was done by NASPA in 2016 looked at all institutions who have emergency aid programs. Across that spectrum of partners, 74% said that they had an emergency aid program. If we look at public four-years, about 82% of universities said that they had an emergency aid program. 73% of private nonprofits said that they did. And about 70% of public two-year universities cited that they had an emergency aid program. This chart is super complicated, right? There's a lot of different things here. But when we send this out to you, the things that we want to focus on are the unrestricted grants column all the way on the right-hand side. What this is showing you is the departments that are typically responsible for those funds. More often today, we see that student affairs and student success are responsible for those funds, more so than the financial aid office. The financial aid office is often focused on cost of tuition, cost of attendance overall, books, and things of that nature, whereas these grants typically sit with student affairs because they're focused on completion, emergency things outside of tuition. This chart is also showing you the number of students that are served annually by those grants, the average amount of aid that's distributed annually across those emergency aid grants, and then the typical average budget that exists on campuses for those grants. And when NASPA asked universities what barriers there were to coordinating additional support services for students, to the point that we talked about earlier, 59% said inadequate staff, right? When you continue to lose students, institutions and universities make the decision to hire less staff, which means there's less support there for institution or for the students as well. And so let's talk a little bit about funding sources. We'll dig into this a little more deeply once we get into the case study here. But wanted to highlight that most of the funding for these different types of emergency aid either come from A, the operating budget, or B, the university foundation or individual donors, okay? And we'll talk about that foundation and individual donor relationship here shortly. We've also seen institutions that have relied on federal and state government assistance programs, especially in light of HERF and CARES Act funding that went out to those institutions. And so who are we at Edquity? We help university partners, community organizations, and government and state institutions design, implement, and manage their emergency aid programs. And we leverage a platform that makes sure the dispersal of that emergency aid assistance is both equitable and efficient for both our partners and for our students. And what we know, based on the data that we've seen across our platform, is that emergency aid works in helping drive those impact numbers that you're focused on at your institution, whether it be enrollment metrics and your final yield, or retention and persistence across the university. These dollars make an impact. So according to that NASPA study, 82% of colleges and universities have said they had a program for at least 3 years. And from that data, 51% said that over a 3-semester period, students who received need-based emergency aid stayed in school at a 51% higher rate than those that did not. So again, that's a statistically significant number of folks who are staying when this money is given to them. And if we translate that again to dollars for the university, it's a substantial revenue impact. But what we know is that while emergency aid works and it's a best practice, things that plague the efficiency of the program, it's costly, it can be slow, and it can be ineffective and inequitable depending on how the program is designed. And so the issues that we see with it is it lacks racial equity, right? It often requires that students perform poverty to a degree, whether it's complete an application, share a bill that they need paid, come and talk to a counselor to tell them more about why they need this aid. It can be a situation where our implicit biases get baked into that equation and slip into a place where we see more white students getting aid than other people of color getting aid who might actually need it. Slow processing times. If you tend to rely on a typical accounts payable process, we see that on average, it takes 13 days for students to get that aid once they're approved for it. We also know that there's a heavy burden on staff. If you have a basic needs coordinator or somebody internally that is reviewing those applications, it can take 2 to 10 hours to review an application and take all of the steps necessary to implement a payment for a student. And one thing that came through in the NASPA data that we shared earlier is that institutions struggle with the reporting and compliance standards that are required across the university and for grants to be able to display how these funds are making an impact on the university. And so what we do here at Edquity is we focus again on that equitable and timely distribution of that aid for students. On average, it takes students about 7 minutes to complete our application for aid. Just some screenshots here to show you kind of the case management functionality and what that application looks like for you. But on average, the application takes about 7 minutes to complete. Students get a decision on their application within 24 hours. Again, if a student has an emergency, telling them that it'll take 7 to 10 days for a payment is not timely. It's not meeting them where they are. And so this timing is incredibly important to them. And then through our platform, students generally get their funds within 48 hours from completing their application. So we reduce the application processing time. We reduce the amount of time it takes to make a payment for the student. And so for students, what this means is there's an increased likelihood of graduating. Once they graduate, an increase in their lifetime earnings. And what we see across that population, because they're completing, those students are also more likely to pay back their debt, which means a lowering of loan default rates for the institution. For partners, and you'll hear some of this today in the case study, it improves retention outcomes. It drives tuition revenue as you save those students. It lowers that administrative and compliance cost. And then it can increase the advancement in fundraising initiatives by leveraging that data to show that the impact that you've made on your students and on the campus more holistically. And so just here's some insights around that data that we provide to our partners. Again, who are the applicants? What are the breakdowns of challenges that they're facing? Because again, we know that emergency aid isn't a catch-all for every problem that students are facing, right? It usually is a minor solution to in an ecosystem of things that need to take care of a much more broader set of issues. But what this data allows you to do is prioritize how you tackle those on campus. If you see substantial need for food, it could say that you need to bolster the food pantry and additional resources on campus. If it says transportation is an issue, it allows you to look at what types of transportation students are utilizing on campus and maybe focus in on that segment of the population. And so the data carries even beyond just emergency financial aid. And so with that, I'm going to turn things over to Maria so she can talk about CSU Dominguez Hills.
Thank you so much, Larry. So as you know, as a way of kind of like introduction for, the case study, our campus, Dominguez Hills is about 13 miles away, from Los Angeles. We are a public, comprehensive, university. We also as well, we are very much, suburban. We're on a semester, academic, calendar. And our campus is very unique, like many other places where they might have, a majority of, students. That means that we are not only designated as a minority serving institution, but we're also a Hispanic serving institution. For our undergraduate, population, we have about 13,000. And some of the key things that I just wanted to mention, so it kind of like puts some context, to the work that we do with students. 95% of our students are commuters. There's about a third of our student population that they are 25 years or older. 48% of our students are also first gen. And so really unpacking a lot of this information that they don't know is key to that communication and that collaboration and partnership with them. And out of that percentage, 65% of them, they are Pell eligible. And so it really kind of, provides, some key data to really move forward, with, those next steps. And as you can probably imagine, our students face a number of obstacles because they might be coming from an under-resourced, school district. They're low income, they're first gen. So those are some of the key pieces, that are, part of the kind of like landscape of our campus. One of the things that I wanted to mention, that is a positive, and we had been designated, we're kind of like second in the nation as providing our students economic mobility. That means that, helping our low income students we are helping them achieve, success in that process. So as indicated, for this webinar, we literally fundraise this past year to really engage in conversations about how do we best support our students, particularly after we kind of like going through the pandemic, understanding some of the trauma and some of the issues that might come up in terms of academics, social issues, but also those financial constraints were key to us. And so we decided to support key partners at the community college level, supporting our transfer students from 5 institutions, and that's El Camino Community College, Los Angeles Harvard Community College, Los Angeles Southwest College, Compton College, in West Los Angeles. And so this was kind of like our way to start kind of like taking a key overview on what they bring, right? And unpacking that, but also being able to support the students as they needed. So some of the top challenges, that we saw with this, process outside of, that we were able just to support, 288 applications, and we dispense 128,000 to support students directly. We saw that the students really had a number of, categories that they were challenged with. Certainly at the top of, the list, learning was, a key opportunity. We were having a clear understanding that the students needed books, or they needed to get their computer, fixed. There was a number of things, that they utilized the money to support, their learning endeavors. Also, as for transportation. At the time that we were, supporting the students, we are coming back on campus. Our new student orientation was on campus as well. And so this was, a key part of, that equation to really support them. And then there was also food and housing insecurities. So 75% of them, experienced multiple challenges in the areas that I just shared. So for transfer impact, we know anecdotally that students, when they were really able to get, this funding, they really expressed, the fact that they were having challenges, and by really being able to have this opportunity really helped them make decisions, right, about their education. So this particular student shared that the emergency fund impacted my decision to attend CSUDH, because with this help, I noticed that CSUDH Dominguez Hills worries about their students altogether. I was previously attending another large institution, and I experienced many obstacles that could have been avoided if the school provided the help with emergency funds to their students. I'm really thankful for the help I received with this fund. And so we are, as an institution, and as myself, being part of, the principal investigator in this, opportunity, what we're doing is just really being able to see what's the greater impact, right? Anecdotally, we know is support students that were in kind of like that interesting, kind of zone of they have applied, they have been accepted, and now they just needed to make the commitment to that intent to enroll, which incorporates new student orientation, all the fees that come associated with that, and also being able just to enroll for fall semester. And so we are just, looking at the data right now after census to make sure that we're able to see what's the persistence look like, right, for the students that we supported. And so we're thrilled just to kind of like understand, based on feedback from the students, that this was tremendously helpful, and it also supported them in that transition to start at Dominguez Hills. So for, our second finding in regards to our own, like overview of the data, students had some like learning resource challenges. And what we find out is that, students that were able to apply, for that transfer funds, indicated that learning challenges were at a rate of over 27%. and higher than the students at other higher education institutions. And so I think that the biggest, piece for me was just really have a clear understanding that we have seen some of these things prior to the pandemic, but we're also seeing that it's been exacerbated and it is at the forefront of the student, kind of like psyche on the challenges that they're seeing now coming back to campus. And with this, particular quote, I currently travel to my local library to use a computer, very typical of many of our students. I have been saving up for a laptop for school, but I am currently on maternity leave and really need help just getting the bare minimum of my education. So we're going to be unpacking a little bit, of what we saw as well, for different populations that we serve on campus. And here it is, right? So when it comes down to like gender, we were able to see a significant higher percentage of female students that apply for the funds than their male counterparts. Childcare was also key to this, kind of feedback that we heard from the students. And in terms of, disparities, the $600 award that we provided really supported female students with a greater economic benefit and greater access not only to learning, but childcare resources. And that also supported their academic success at Dominguez Hills. So we also find out that in terms of, our group of students, based on, if they were Latinx or, Black students, we actually saw a significant difference, as well for those students that apply for the funds, where our African-American students really were most likely to report challenges with housing than any other transfer student, within, the different ethnic backgrounds, that they share with us. And so with the study, we also found that our Latinx students were less likely to report those challenges with housing and food. And big picture, as we continue to work and support students, right? Every culture, is different, how they manage, these conversations, how do they ask for help or their lack of thereof. So we are seeing, an opportunity here just not to only educate, our student community, but also how do we best, support those next steps. This was just a very small, kind of like token of like, let's find out how we can best support you. But we were also able just to kind of like share resources, additional resources to the students that were part of, this grant. So one of the most interesting pieces, for me, has been about the value that this, has provided us for key partnerships to ensure our students being successful. So there's a number of, equitable opportunities for us. This drove us to this unwavering commitment to equitable opportunities for transfer students to succeed. We have a number of things, that we offer on our campus. We have phenomenal staff that also support, our students, with their specific needs. And so this was one area that really well aligned with, our commitment, not only to our students, but being able just to also think, more broadly, what do we need to do in order to support, our campus community to really engage, as Larry mentioned earlier, if you don't have enough staff, if you don't have, some of those resources to really support the students immediately, right? Time is of essence. And so we wanted just to partner with, a group that can really be aligned with our values, can understand student-centered, approaches to the work, and being able to also support us, with the data and the marketing. And so for me, the data was really key, and Edquity was able to support that process, being able to provide us, on a weekly basis, updates. They were very, very good at, following up and checking in, on a weekly basis. We strategize together. We really kind of like target, some things that, kind of like, this is what we see. What else do we want to continue to support in terms of the larger conversations about resources on and off campus? The marketing tool that they provided us was phenomenal. I can tell you that, this process would have been much more difficult because technically I just, this is my first time doing this, and having that level of guidance and support was tremendous. And when we were just, kind of like coming to a place where we were just looking at, how do we do this? How do we best, support this process? And how do we organize ourselves, right? To set up a good, strong foundation. A couple of my colleagues, with Dr. Jimenez and a colleague that I believe, she's part of our phone call session webinar, Bailey Smith, really said, we just simply don't have the human power just, to do all of this. So this is a great, opportunity for us to establish that relationship and really take care of the students, while in the background, they're helping us, with all of these things. So that right there, it was a win-win, for all of us. So I let Dr. Jimenez share a little bit more about, our institutional partnerships.
Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so let's look ahead and see what it means to design and implement success student support funds for community college transfer students. So in front of you, you see 4 tenets, and let's unpack them. And I'll tell you in the next slide, I'll provide some concrete examples of what we're doing with Compton College and CSU Dominguez Hills. The first one is developing transfer pathways. Community colleges can work closely with the four-year university to develop equitable pathways towards their bachelor degree. I mean, this includes demystifying the transfer process and also offering cross-functional student support. The second piece is broader support throughout the transfer process. Accessing these funds helps reduce stress felt by the students. As we know, students now are facing a higher level of anxiety, depression, especially through the pandemic, through COVID-19, even more so. And providing some of these funds also helps provide a sense of stability and promoting a sense of belonging. The other piece is offering multiple fast funding options. Some of the applicants who took advantage of this program might not have created a student account, right? But they must have the ability to claim these funds directly. And so that's where we can see the partnership here with CSU Dominguez Hills, the other California community colleges, and Edquity, is that students were able to claim the funds directly to their bank, reducing the time from application to award. The last piece here is demystifying and reframing of asking for help. All the partner organizations must work together with students to ensure these resources are available, including in this case, TSSF, the transfer support funds. Additionally, our first generation students and students from marginalized communities identify support channels in various ways, which includes social network, on and off campus. All right, let's move on to the next slide. So now I'm going to give you some concrete examples of what this looks like, both here at Compton College and at CSU Dominguez Hills. So we have the cross-enrollment program, which allows students who are pursuing an associate's degree for transfer to take a course that is degree applicable in either the fall or spring with a low cost of $10. That helps, provide pathway to Compton College to CSU Dominguez Hills. And this includes conversations between both organizations, right? And additional stakeholders, financial aid, academic advising, admissions and records, and so on. I'll tell you very quickly, one of the challenges that we also saw part of this program is that our students had to pay the CSU Dominguez Hills, parking cost. And that can add up although the sticker price is low cost of $10, our students still had to pay parking. And so we work with CSU Dominguez Hills, and students were able to receive free parking. So at Compton College, those students who have the parking permit here were able to park at CSU Dominguez Hills, and CSU Dominguez Hills would honor the Compton College parking permit, which is really good news. In addition to that, Compton College paid for student parking permits for 2022-2023. Program and data sharing MOU, which is huge. For our students, we need to understand the information. So we were able to put together an MOU data sharing agreement between Compton College and CSU Dominguez Hills and look at the information and let that guide us and understand, the transfer student behavior and help us, make more informed decisions on student support. The other piece that we've worked on and continue to work on is transfer program pathways. We actually we partnered with CSU Dominguez Hills, and students are able to visually see 10 programs here at Compton College, 10 associate degree for transfer degrees at Compton College, visually look at what courses they need to take, semester after semester. In addition to that, they could also look at what courses they need at CSU Dominguez Hills to complete a bachelor's in that same program. This was no easy feat. It included, time and time again to meet and convene with CSU Dominguez Hills, disciplined faculty, chairs, deans, and so on. But we were able to put a pathway through Program Mapper, and students were able to see both, courses they needed at Compton and the courses remaining at CSU Dominguez Hills. The last piece is the Diamond Lee Institute that we have also a partnership with CSU Dominguez Hills. We work with CSU Dominguez Hills to recruit Compton College students to become fellows, really focusing on public policy and social entrepreneurship. It's a really super engaging institute that also includes an cultural immersive trip to Ghana. And this is just another way that we're able to work with CSU Dominguez Hills to strengthen the transfer process and sort of demystify that at the same time. And I'll hand it over to you, Larry.
Well,
so if I
thank you
can
both.
add before we go into questions, one interesting process that Dr. Jimenez and I we were, as we kind of started conversing about our students and how we can make this transfer student opportunity not only an engaging opportunity for the students, but really looking at the success and the opportunities to really pave the way, right, to get there. We really kind of took a step back and really examine opportunities for looking at the strengths and the weaknesses, looking at ways where we can just look at transfer trends and best practices. There've been a number of conversations outside of what Dr. Jimenez just shared that we've been wanting to continue to have. It's going to take us a little bit time to get there, but the fact that we were able to get our faculty members from each one of our institutions to be part of this conversation and being able to support some of the pieces that Dr. Jimenez was talking about really created an amazing opportunity to really expand, the landscape of the work that we do with transfers. And so it should not be only looked at as a kind of transactional piece, but what are the support systems that we're building in order to ensure that they kind of get to know, their 4-year institution before they even transfer here, and being able to also kind of see our campus as they have my back. Obviously, this is a place I want to be part of, and I want to engage, with the campus community at an earlier time. And so I will, also say that, kind of co-creating these opportunities, we really have discussed, reverse transfer, advising support, orientation, peer mentors. These are kind of high impact practices. How do we best do this, for the group of students, that we're able to see in the incoming class? but also as well as being able to have, this early engagement that really aligns, with the work that we want to do in supporting students more holistically, right? It's not only this one thing or this other, it's really looking at, the full picture and how do we deliver comprehensive services that are going to have an impact in the student experience, but also as they might struggle with some things, it's not defining the experience. It's just, we're aware and we're just, developing plans and co-creating opportunities to really support those students early on without the student needing to just basically put themselves out there like, I need help, right? It's, as Larry mentioned earlier, reframing how do we ask for help.
Excellent. Well, thanks to both of you for the presentation today. To all of our attendees, if you have any questions, please feel free to use that Q&A button at the bottom, and we'll check those out. And then in between questions, I'll let them pile up a little bit. I also have some that I can pose to the both of you, but we have a first one that's come in here. It says, a common question we run into is funding emergency aid programs. Do you have any thoughts on how to find or partner for funding opportunities?
On my end, once I kind of like understand, the students, I seek out a lot of, the local foundations just to see if this might be of an interest, right? As we fundraise, really developing, collaborations, with our not only faculty, but our deans and associate deans to understand the specific needs, of their college has also been tremendous. And I have to say, our president and our provost have been tremendously supportive of, myself having conversations, outside of, the campus community and being able to engage the larger LA County for really being able to work together, right? We can't continue to think that we're going to be doing this on our own. And I think sometimes higher education institutions tend to be very insular or siloed. And our campus has really engaged all of us as a culture just to really look for opportunities that are going to enhance, the student experience, but that also is going to give us that level of, kind of gravitas, to support our students, because we understand that many of our students are struggling financially. It was in the past, and now, like as we mentioned, with the pandemic, it really exacerbated, this as a top challenge out of the many. I don't know if Dr. Jimenez, do you have any other addition to that?
Yeah, I would say it also means it has to start at the top. And there needs to be, a significant investment from, the president, CEO, executive leadership, and all, the faculty, the administrators, and classified professionals, to make this a priority. And so what does that look like? That could be, sustaining these funds, including that in the strategic plan or your master plan. But in addition to that, your question is, where can we find additional funding? To Dr. Grandone's point, when we did this program and we offered the funding with CSU Dominguez Hills and the neighboring California community colleges, this actually came through a grant that Dr. Grandone had worked on. So, there should be, institutional support, but with Dr. Grandone's lead, we were able to secure additional funding through grants. So looking at that externally can also help.
That's great. Thank you, team. We have another question in the Q&A, but I want to pose one to you first before I know some folks start to drop off kind of at this point in the webinar. We talked a lot about the partnership that you all formed, and then that the additional community colleges have formed. If people are thinking to themselves, this sounds great, but where do I start? How would you, what insight would you provide to them about forming those partnerships with their local institutions, but also not only on an institution to institution basis, but on a one-to-one, an individual to individual? How do you find your counterparts at those institutions as well?
I don't want to take over, but I at least for me, it's all about alignment of the values, that we have here at the institution, my own personal values or, professional values that are very student-centered in my approach to the work. I want to be able to really engage with people that are going to be a thought partner, a problem solver, being able to be like, we understand that there are challenges, but really find ways, to move and really kind of like make a dent, moving forward on behalf of the students. And so, it takes time. It takes time to develop those relationships, but, having willing partners like Dr. Jimenez has been tremendous because, sometimes you have, big ideas and sometimes it just doesn't necessarily quite align quickly because there might be some other work that needs to be done. And so I think for me, it's all about really understanding what are our strengths, our collective strengths, what are some of the basic, assets, that we bring to the table, and how do we engage in that conversation by being a thought committed partner that is going to be looking at the best we can do together to support the students. It takes time, it takes some planning. Certainly takes, a group of people that is willing to kind of like go the difficult route. Sometimes, some of the conversations, can be challenging, but if you keep at the forefront, the students and how do we best, want to supply this opportunity for engagement, for success, for having this sense of belonging and really make sure that the students understand that as they're coming to your campus, in our case, right, they're kind of between their campus and ours. We want to continue that conversation. We want to just let them know, like, just because you have transferred, from your community college doesn't mean that they're kind of like push you out. Now you're us, you're part of our community and they're done. We continue to have those larger conversations and communications. And we, one of the things that Dr. Jimenez has done so well is he wants to know how the students are doing. Okay, we send this many students to your campus, how they're doing, what's going on, how can we best, continue to have opportunities, to support the students. And so for our campus, it has been a very good, positive, conversation about what will those next steps look like. And it all starts, with, connecting with the campus community. I'm one of those people that I'm very proactive in my approach. I reach out. I want to make sure that, as if anybody's telling me there's no money, I'll find a way, because I know how difficult and stressful that can be. I mean, when you don't have any money, that's the first thing that comes to mind. And you might be putting away a meal so you can pay, for parking, or you can pay for gas, so we understand that, if those basic needs are not being supported, how can you be successful, right? So we want to make sure that, we come as a partner in this process with our students, letting them know you belong here and we have your back.
And very quickly, I'll add to that. I agree with Dr. Grandone. It takes time, but it's also about people and building relationships with both institutions. The thing too is, we may have different ideas of how to achieve an outcome, but we both, between Compton College and CSU Dominguez Hills, we stay objective in that we're student driven and we're student focused. So that's what grounds our work. It has evolved. We've had a convening where we included faculty from both colleges, well, Compton College and CSU Dominguez Hills. We have monthly meetings between, Compton College and CSU Dominguez Hills, which includes, additional key stakeholders, as I mentioned, admissions and records, executive leadership like vice presidents, academic advising, counseling, financial aid, and so on. So just that continuous, building of rapport between one another really helps us, look at critically at the student transfer process and our student transfer behavior.
And I can add to that, and this is just one of those things, right? We were both very willing to like, hey, we're both have packed schedules. Can we meet at 7:30 in the morning or at 7 a.m.? That happened. And we were able just to be cut clean in what we needed. Where do we needed support? I mean, it's been a great, collaboration, but being able just to really kind of like look at, what will it take to make this, opportunity work, and what do we need to set up in terms of, the foundation. So we understand that when we need help or when we need, feedback, that we can just, kind of like communicate that, and being able just to kind of then come to the table and being able to then, move things forward. So I'm just so appreciative and grateful for Dr. Jimenez, because he clearly, put at the, the students at the forefront. And I can tell you, like, sometimes we say it, but how we do things might look different, in reality. And so being able just to understand what are the boundaries, right? And how do we want to, kind of like collaborate and set up that partnership moving forward is critical.
Excellent. Thank you both. The next question we have from the audience: what communication strategies do you have for sharing knowledge of these programs with the transfer student population? Have certain methods worked more than others?
Wow, that's a great question. I can tell you this is one area where I feel like I'm still learning, and I'm still trying to figure it out, how do we do this, on our campus, because there's so many messages that go to students, and we want to be sensitive, on how do we best provide students with critical key information that they're going to need at a certain time. So for me, the collaboration with, Edquity about, this process has been phenomenal, because it just really gave me like, here's what you do depending on the situation. And then I was able to put that through a calendar. And so that worked out. Internally for our campus, this is one area that I'm working on right now with our communications team, to be able to share, with the campus community what is being available, what do we offer to the students. So particularly for like advisors and anybody that is very student serving, in the work that they do, that they are able just to say, here's where you go, here's where you can inquire in information, here's the website. And so those are the next steps, that I'm working on. But is a constant, challenge. How do you do this with so much information provided to the students? And what are maybe the social media outside of, kind of like what we put on the website, that are going to continue to support the students, in that conversation. And so for us in the past has been, also engaging, what we call our peer coaches, to really create this conversation peer to peer. Because sometimes, when they hear from administrators, it's typically kind of like, do I owe money? What's going on, right? It's already putting a little bit of, kind of like pressure on the students, why is this person contacting me? But if there's another student that is like, hey, this really helped me, you might want to just, check this out, or feel free to communicate if you have any questions. It's been a tremendous, level of support for the students to engage with the campus community and understand that we have a community of care, that it goes beyond faculty and other staff or administrators on campus, that students are actually very much engaged in that conversation.
And I'll just add to that. I'll tell you, for the funds that we're giving to students who transferred from Compton College to CSU Dominguez Hills, through the MOU data sharing agreement, Dr. Grandone was able to let us know, like, these are the students, who applied and who are eligible. And so we got that list. And then we have the transfer center at Compton College, and we were able to call the students, follow up with them via email. And sometimes whatever we needed to address, we would contact Dr. Grandone, and we contact Edquity, and we would resolve those issues. But it's just more than probably Dr. Grandone and myself, right? There's other people who are helping us. Like with the transfer center, we had the counselors, our advisors who help, particularly with that project. In addition to that, communication strategies and how do we inform others. One example, at Compton College, we have the social sciences completion team, which is made up of discipline faculty, counseling faculty, admissions and records, financial aid. So it's a group of people dedicated to that meta major, and they text message students and email students, whether it's the cross enrollment program that we recently launched or revived with CSU Dominguez Hills, the Diamond League Institute. So those are just a couple of ways we're able to communicate with students.
Great. And one thing from the equity perspective, team, that we often see, right, is we at the university, we get used to those traditional communication methods, right? Email, text message, phone calls, things like that. But the key thing here is to meet your students where they are, right? When they go into a student information system, a lot of times they're looking at for something specific, class schedule, account balances, paying a bill, right? If they're logging into a financial aid management system, it's to see their award or to claim their funds. And so what are other avenues that you can use to communicate with students, right? If you have a learning management system that you're leveraging on campus, could you post a notification in there for a certain segment of students? Can you partner with faculty where you know that this population of students is often taking their courses and get it added to a syllabus, right? Or have a resources section that the university implements across all syllabi on campus, right? For a certain population of students. So, get creative in the ways that you think about communicating. We often see that we rely on those typical channels, and they tend to be some of the least effective channels. And so thinking about where your students are living and breathing and interacting daily with one another and with other folks on campus is a critical component of creating that successful communication strategy. So looks like the last question here for the two of you. The panelists may have mentioned this, but was there an award cap for students, or did the funding amounts fluctuate? If there was a cap, how did you decide on the dollar amount?
That's a great question. Part of, the conversation internally for us, this was engagement with, our enrollment management, partners, financial aid, financial services, being able to brainstorm about, if we're going to offer this, will this be hurting students, or will this be complementing the student experience? And it's not going to be another added stress. And so when we were looking at, this process altogether, given some of the nuances, with policies and why not, we decided just to really kind of like serve the students that were in that transition, right? So, and given the amount of money that we fundraised, which wasn't a ton of money, we wanted just to be equitable and fair, in this process, but being able to make a little bit of a dent, right? We're not going to be providing $20 just because we know that that's not going to, reach, for very much, not even for gas nowadays, right? So we wanted just to make sure that, the funding was making a dent, in that the funding felt like, okay, maybe I needed a little bit more, but actually I wasn't expecting this, right? So being able just to talk, with our colleagues about, what will that amount look like? It was, that first step. So that's, how we determined that. And then as the students, had the opportunity to apply, for this, funding, we wanted to make sure that across the board, it was the same, right? We wanted just to, regardless, if you were just, applying, you were eligible, and you were just given like, yes, you qualify for this, it was, the same across the board for everyone. In the future, if we have more money, that will be a little bit different. But I think that for us, it was, more of the conversation. How can we make this, short time where we get their attention to really entertain coming to Dominguez or going to some other campus? Like many students were in between. This made a difference. And we anecdotally know that. And so, we'll see. I mean, I think that this was, our approach. I'm assuming, there are other ways, of doing this. I know Dr. Jimenez has, kind of like delved into this as well. And I don't know how the community college, works on that, but at least for us, that's how it worked out.
Excellent. Well, I don't see any more questions in the Q&A area. So I want to extend my thanks to Dr. Grandone and Dr. Jimenez for participating in the webinar today. I want to thank all of our participants who joined us for today's webinar. We will be sharing this deck with you so you have all the information. And then at the end of next week, we'll also be sharing the formal case study that'll be coming out. So keep your eyes peeled via email for that information. We hope you all have a great rest of your day and a fantastic upcoming weekend. Thanks again for joining us.